Now that the city is reopening talks of creating an updated north-south corridor, they're forced to resolve another complicated issue.
The city finally has to make up its mind on who will own the marshland that a new highway could potentially impact. News 8's Jenna Traum joins us with a look at why it's back on the table after stalling out for more than a decade.
Mike and Lisa, more than a decade ago, the city agreed to transfer its ownership of marshland to the Department of Natural Resources. But that plan stalled when the north-south corridor referendum failed in 1998. Now that the city is talking about a new north-south corridor project, figuring out who owns what has to happen before any plans can be made for a highway that could impact a portion of those wetlands. La Crosse's marshlands are a scenic part of the city's landscape and a vital part of its ecosystem.
You know, this wetland has a lot of values, as is true for all wetlands. It's particularly important from a wildlife habitat standpoint. In addition to that, it's extremely important to attenuate the impacts of flooding. It's a spectacular open area in the middle of the city, and it gets a tremendous amount of recreational use.
Right now, the City Board of Public Works is trying to work out how to make good on a resolution directing the city to transfer its ownership of hundreds of acres of wetlands to the Department of Natural Resources, a resolution that's more than a decade old.
There was a resolution passed many years ago that directed the city engineering department to do that. Unfortunately, that resolution wasn't explicit in being able to answer a number of the questions that came up as the city engineer looked into that task.
The discussion is starting up again now that the city is considering whether to move forward with plans to develop a road that would cut down on traffic between North and South La Crosse.
We'd want to make sure that we don't transfer so much of the wetlands and the marsh to DNR that we don't have a corridor for the potential north-south corridor.
That's a conversation the DNR wants to be a part of.
Well, you know, this is kind of the nature of the beast with these sorts of things. It's a very classic situation where we're trying to balance economic development with environmental protection, and there's a balance out there somewhere. These are some of the most difficult conversations that any community can have, and I'm happy that we're talking about having that conversation now.
The district land program manager for the DNR tells me the department would be able to provide a higher level of wetland protection in the city. He also says state ownership of the marsh as a whole unit will allow the department to manage it as one ecosystem, which he says would be better for its wildlife and plant life.
Thank you, Jenna. The Board of Public Works will meet again next week to discuss future plans for ownership of the marsh.